everyone. Hello. Excited Utterance here. My name's Hella, and it's been a little while since I've covered the Steve Gosney situation. In fact, it's been just over a year, I think, since I did a stream about the lovely Steve Gosney, great friend of the channel, great friend of so many of us, defense attorney, now civil attorney over in Florida, and he used to live on Daytona Beach and now lives down in Miami. And those of you who don't know the story about how he ended up being a civil attorney down in Miami, well, you probably would want to catch up on my last stream about this. And maybe one of the lovely mods will put that into chat for us. But it wasn't the happiest story. Steve's a pretty happy guy. And the way he ended up in the position that he's in right now, and he's a gracious and grateful person, and he makes the best of every situation. But the way he ended up in the job role that he's in right now is not a happy story. And this, hopefully, what we're going to cover today is the last chapter in the ordeal that he's been through over the last year to sort of 18 months. And I hope that this closes it. And I'm going to just say hi to everybody before we start. And then I'm going to get into the content for this stream. And every now and again, I'll stop and answer some questions and do some super chats and things like that. But I'm going to keep it flowing. So not ignoring people. I just want to keep it going for the sake of the video content. So firstly, I want to say EDW Raptor was really straight in there with 10 Excited Utterance memberships and then another 10 Excited Utterance memberships. Thank you for the support. You are amazing. And then Darlene says she's ignoring me as usual. Yeah, well, I do that. But thank you for being a member for 21 months. And also my fantastic co-host. And for being in chat today, modding, you're wonderful. EDW Raptor, 20 Excited Utterance memberships is really a big investment. So thank you for doing that and supporting the channel and just being a great friend. Everyone who's new, say thank you to EDW Raptor for your membership and welcome to the channel. And make sure that if you are a brand new member that you have a look at the members only content and that you come onto the Discord because that's members only as well. So have a look under membership perks. Mavka, you've been a member for 5 months, really? Hey, good to see you, mate. And he just says N. Well, that's great. Good to see you. Belfast Barbie says, it's midnight, I'm drunk, just found this. You seem cool. Oh, that's nice. Well, we're about to cover some interesting topics, and I hope that you enjoy it. EDW is the best. Yes, he's pretty great. Bring in the Wizard of God. No, Steve is not coming on the stream today, just like he didn't a year ago when I covered his situation in Miami-Dade. The reason he's not coming on today is because this is a suit where he is the plaintiff. So he can't be speaking. That wouldn't be right. I am going to be covering his suit and breaking it down for you. It's a defamation suit and tortious interference. And so I know this case very well. I covered it last year. I know the articles that were written, when they were written, and what the claims are against the defendants in this case. So I'm going to go through that with you today. It would not be right for me to put him in a situation where he needed to speak on this. So yes, the lawsuit is out there. It's public. And we will be going through that today. Member for 8 months there, EDW Raptor. You're amazing. Please be good in chat, everyone. Yep, absolutely. Okay, let's go. It is unfortunate. This is very unfortunate that this is happening. But Steve Gosney is a fantastic person and somebody who he doesn't go after he doesn't just go after money, right? This is not somebody who is just going to go shake people down. He would have thought really carefully about this. And when it comes down to it, it would have been a matter of principle for him. I know that what's happened to him has affected him deeply. Those of you guys who have been watching him over the last year or two would have seen the change in him. And this, I'm not going to get like emotional about it, but I'm going to show you some footage of him and how he has reacted personally, the change in his demeanor, the way he has, his life has been transformed by these attacks, these media attacks on his integrity. And they're completely unfounded, and it's wrong. And this is what this suit is about. And these people should not be allowed to get away with this. His professional reputation has been completely obliterated by these articles. And it's absolutely wrong. He's nearing the end of his career. He's only a few years away from retirement. He had a spotless record, an amazing career. And they just tore it down over nothing, over a fictional novel. So that's what I want to talk to you about today. Thank you, Sean. $14.99. I can't give away memberships. That's cool. Thank you so much for the support, Sean in Sydney, Sean the Sheep. And David says, I promise to not make fun of your features. What features? My features are beautiful. Thank you, David. $9.99, making it look simple. Everyone subscribe to David's channel as well. David's a great lawyer from Michigan and a good friend of Steve's as well. Please feel free to correct me, David, in chat, or any other lawyers, because I ain't a lawyer. I've just been doing a lot of research on this, so consider me a pseudo-journalist. Maybe I'm a fake journalist and a fake lawyer today. But do feel free to correct me if you see or listen to anything that I say that is utterly incorrect. Okay, let's get into it now. Now. Okay. Mr. Gosney sues the press. It's the Miami Herald up there. All right, so what I want to do is I want to take you back a little bit to Gosney. Let's go back to Steve Gosney pre-Miami, so circa May 2024. And yeah, as I said, like everything was pretty sweet. Like, remember him back in his room with all the books behind him and his guitars and stuff, and he was just, yeah, a picture of health. He shared his feelings with us as he left his job 14 years with the state public defender's office. I'm just going to play you a tiny little clip now. Yeah.
But what I want to talk about is I want to look back. I'll tell you, I had a little, I guess I could say, a wake-up call, a kind of the reality is starting to hit home that I'm actually leaving my home of 56 years, my entire life I've lived here, and I'm actually closing that door. And my job of 14 years being a public defender, doing appeals and stuff. And I went into work, I guess it was yesterday, I went into work and all my cases have been reassigned. Which was kind of shocking. It was kind of, now, of course, I'm appreciative. It's great. It's great. I'm glad that they're excited utterance. Boy, we're getting some good people here. Good to see you. We're putting in the chat where you're all from here. So that was kind of like cold water, like, gee, this is really happening, right? I mean, I'm kind of in a fog. I'm not really good at change. I am good at popcorn. So I thought what I do is, because you can look back, I can get angry or negative, and obviously I want to look forward. I've got a new opportunity, and we'll do that, and that's for another time. But I want to talk about just kind of a career retrospective. And I know, and what I thought I'd do is talk about what I've accomplished in those 14 years and intersperse. And one of the reasons I thought about that, I thought it'd be kind of a good just for posterity to put all that down. So I can pray on it. I can thank God for the gift that I've been given for a great 14-year career in the public defender's office. And I can talk it all out with y'all and then kind of close that door and move forward. And also as part of that, see, here's the part that you might like. This is all, I'm just talking to the wind, right? The good part about this is I want to go through some of my highlights, my career highlights of some of the cases that I've done.
Okay, so this is as he's actually packing his house up in Daytona Beach, and as you said, he's lived there 56 years, so his whole life, right? He's brought his family up in this house. You can see all the stuff that's packed up behind him. It's a giant deal to take this job at the state attorney's office in Miami-Dade, right? 14 years with the public defender's office, assistant public defender, with the as a state public defender with at that in that area at Daytona Beach. So sorry if I'm not familiar with the Florida counties, but he is very settled there. His family's there. He's uprooted everything. And as I said, he doesn't like change. Most people don't like moving is one of the hardest things we do in our entire lives, right? But he's also excited. Like, he's excited for a big move. So that's Steve's then. And he doesn't have any clue what's about to hit him as he embarks on this journey. So let's now go forward. Right, so he was like the happiest, most fun-loving and giving character you could hope to meet, both in person and online. And you can see he was really like healthy and well. And there was a period when all this stuff happened, when he lost a lot of weight, and he got really like sad over what happened, and you would too. And we're going to go through what happened. His CV spoke for itself. He had a career that was greatly focused on serving the state of Florida, both as a prosecutor and public defender. He became qualified to argue death penalty appeals and argue before the Florida Supreme Court on many occasions. Okay, so a family man dedicated to his faith and his principles, and basically an all-round top bloke. We call them top blokes around here. Then something happened. So he moved, right? And Steve made the big move to Miami to accept his new role with the Miami-Dade State Attorney's Office, and then a bombshell hit, right? So within not long, like maybe a week of him taking that role and being sworn in, this, Exhibit A. This happens, right? Now, those of you who know Steve know that he writes, right? And he talks about the fact that he writes. Like, he gets on stream and stuff and he goes, I've got this book. I've written a book about that. It's a bit of a meme that Steve's always going, well, I've written a book about that, or I've written an article about that. Steve doesn't only write textbooks, he writes fictional books as well. Like, he's even written some kids' books, like Brucey, the one-eyed wonder dog. Well, he did write a book which was, let's say, a little bit on the adult side. It was not porn, as some people like to call it. Now, these two women, Brittany Warman and Sarah Blasky, got hold of this book and decided to write this piece in the Miami Herald. So on July 3rd, 2024, which was very close to when he actually was sworn in, they wrote this piece titled, "A Man Hired to Train Miami Prosecutors Wrote a Violent, Racy Last Novel." So that's at 8:03 p.m., July 3rd, 2024. Okay. So that's Exhibit A. And then later that day or into the night, might have been July 4th. Let's just go forward. Also Exhibit A. This was updated and the name of the article was changed to Reality Check, Women Are Sex Objects in Sadomasochistic Novel by Man Hired to Train Miami Prosecutors. Right? So it's like, does one thing equal the other? Like, does the book influence his hiring? Does the book have anything to do at all with his ability to do his job? P.S. The job he was hired to do was to clean up the state attorney's office, right? And I mean, like, to teach ethical matters, to help them to train prosecutors to do better work in terms of their ethics, their morals, if I've got any. So this Brittany Warman and Sarah Blasky, they wrote these two articles. It's sort of one article that's melded into another one very quickly. So this is saying July 5, let's go back. July 5, July 3. Okay, so this is what, within sort of 24 hours. So 8:03 p.m. July 3, and then it changes to July 5, 12:01. Now, if you go and look on this website now, you'll see it's all been updated to like January 2025. So it's really hard to see when they actually wrote it. But this is, I've got these screen captures I've got are from last year. And I do have the original articles as well, obviously. All right, so that's Exhibit A. And then we've got Exhibit B. Lawyer who wrote sadomasochistic novel is cutting ties with Miami State Attorney's Office. So 2 months after the Miami-Dade State Attorney's Office hired a lawyer to train new prosecutors, he is leaving the job amid controversy over his recently self-published novel, rife with sexual violence and misogyny. Steve Gosney, a Daytona Beach public defender, moved his family to Miami to start a job training new prosecutors and helping shore up some of the ethical issues that have encircled the Miami-Dade State Attorney's Office this year. And by the way, there were a lot. And there's more to that. And Brittany Warman has her name on this one. So that's Exhibit B. And we'll look at that more in a minute. Okay, so there's the 1.5/2 articles. Oh, hello, Max. How are you? They took the holiday off. Was there a holiday? Oh, sorry. August? Oh, it's because it was the 4th of July. All right, I'm an Australian. I missed that. Duh. Okay, so here's the allegation. So it's defamation and tortious interference. Tortious. I'm pretty bad at saying that. Tortious interference. Okay, so what is a tort? Firstly, it's not a cake, although it could be. Do they even spell the cake like that? Well, a tort has an E on the end. Tort is a wrongful act or an infringement of a right other than under contract leading to legal liability. So it's the word tort is not being used that way in tortious interference. So it just means a wrongful act, legally wrongful. Defamation, we kind of all probably know what defamation is. So it is a tort, so it's a wrongful act, where someone publishes or communicates a false statement, really, really bloody important, right? So it's got to be untrue, actually untrue, and it must damage another person's reputation. Tortious interference, so keyword being interference there, the wrongful and intentional disruption of a valid contract or a business relationship by a third party. Okay, so what that refers to is Steve's employment with the Miami State Attorney's Office. So did Miami Herald and the two writers wrongfully and intentionally stick their noses in and try and get him fired, in layman's terms? Okay, so defamation, a tort where someone publishes or communicates a false statement. So the difference between the two. So defamation focuses on the reputation of the person and the damages that that causes to them, whereas the tortious interference focuses on the business and economic interests, right? So the wrongful and intentional disruption of a valid contract or business relationship by a third party. So whilst they're different, they sort of meld together, and that's why they're together in the same suit. Okay. So elements of defamation, really super important, right? So these things all need to be ticked off, tick, 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 tick. The most important thing with defamation, always, 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 is whether or not the thing was true, right? So you can't say that someone is defaming you if they're saying the truth, right? So it has to be a false statement of fact. Publication to a third party, well, you can't say someone's defaming you if they're just like saying it to themselves, right? So putting it out on a public forum, like on the Miami Herald, is obviously publication to a third party, so other people. Identification of the plaintiff, they have to say it's you or make it really clear that it's obviously you. In this case, they've named him. They've named Steve Gosney, so obviously there's a tick. Harm to reputation, in brackets, damages. So Steve would have the burden to prove that there has been a harm to his reputation. That's fairly easy to prove, and that there's been damage from that. Negligence or even malice in making said statement. So negligence did the news organization and the journalists do their due diligence in checking their facts? Did they know that they got it wrong? Malice is important because if the person is a public figure, there has to be malice, because when someone's a public figure, people can talk about them, like there's gossip and stuff like that, right? And I mean, I'm not an expert on all this, but I do know that you need to have show malice if someone's considered a public figure. And the laws in Florida were actually broadened to include people with big social media followings and stuff like that. Now, Steve doesn't have like a huge social media following, but he may be considered a public figure. The lawsuit does cover actual malice regardless whether the court would see him as a public figure. And you'll see that when we read out the lawsuit. Elements of tortious interference. So existence of a contract or business relationship. Yeah, he would be employed. Defendant's knowledge of that relationship. Well, they reported on it. Defendant's intentional and unjustified interference. Well, you guys will probably have to decide for yourself when we read the lawsuit whether or not you think that the defendants might have had intentional and unjustified interference, but that would come out later. Loss or termination of the relationship, well, he lost his job, and damages such as financial loss. Well, I think that's fairly obvious. All right, so let's have a bit of a look at the lawsuit. And we'll go here. I'm just going to change my layout a bit. Give me 2 seconds. Boom, boom, boom. This could work. It could work. I could put myself up there. That might work better. Yeah, I might do that. Okay, that's better. Just try and make it a little bit more readable for you. Good. Okay. All right, so in the Circuit Court of the 11th Judicial Circuit in Miami-Dade County. So we're not going to read the entire thing. I've been through it and highlighted the most important parts. There's obviously with these, when there's several defendants and such, there's a bit of repetition. Am I looking at the right one? Oh, yeah. Okay, so we've got our defendants are McClatchy Co. LLC, which obviously is the Miami Herald. We've got Brittany Norman, who is AKA Brittany Warman. So this Brittany lady obviously has a pen name or something, or maybe that's a maiden name, don't know. But Brittany Warman is the lady who wrote the articles. And then we've also got this Sarah Blasky, who Sarah Blasky seems to be either a co-reporter or I don't know, maybe if she's a researcher or something, but she was named on the first article. I've seen some screenshots and things of her being named on the second article or maybe the update to the first article, but there's been like, you know how I was saying before that when you go and look and see that there's like updated dates, it's really hard to tell like what they've done to the articles over time. So I think Steve's lawyers are going to have to just double check their discovery and make sure that they've got the exact versions of what the articles were that were published and whose names were associated with them. Anyway, and yeah, apparently this Sarah Blasky has gone on to work for the Washington Post. Anyway, plaintiff Steve Gosney, hereinafter just Gosney, by and through undersigned counsel, hereby files this complaint against defendants, McClatchy Co., Miami Herald, hereinafter Miami Herald, Brittany Norman, and as reporter for Miami Herald, Warman, so he's just going to call them Warman, Blasky, and Miami Herald. So it's a civil action by the plaintiffs against defendants for actions that took place in Miami-Dade, Florida, with damages far exceeding $50,000, exclusive of interest, costs, and attorney's fees, which invokes the jurisdiction of this honorable court. So ticked off that we've got the right jurisdiction. Plaintiff is an individual practicing attorney residing in Miami, Florida, and defendant Miami Herald is a corporation organized and existing under the laws of the state of Delaware. Okay, so the Miami Herald is a news business with primary area of circulation in the South Florida counties of Miami-Dade, Broward, and Monroe, but has a substantial national and international presence. Okay, so this is important. So just because the Miami Herald is the Miami Herald doesn't mean that that's all of its reach. It's not, right? So these articles have gone far further, and they've caused Steve far greater damage to his reputation further afield than just the southern area of Florida, for example. International online presence, yes. It's believed that defendant Warman is an individual residing in Miami-Dade, Florida, and defendant Blasky is also in the area. Warman and Blasky both, individually and as per the directions of Miami Herald, published articles about Gosney soon after he was employed as an assistant state attorney in the Miami area. The subject of this complaint alleges that defendants either intentionally or negligently published false disparaging statements of fact with the malicious intent to interfere with Gosney's professional career and defame his character. Okay, so malicious intent and to interfere with Gosney's professional career and defame his character, right? And it's also false. So that ticks a lot of the boxes that we were talking about earlier. Hey, Dina, how are you? I'm late. Thanks for sharing with us. I hope Gosney is hanging in there. The whole thing is dumb, and I can't believe everything they put him through. Yeah. I know, mate. Thank you for the 19.99. Really appreciate it, love. And say hi to Sean. And the papa. And the kitties. Oh, 2 puppies, sorry. The kitties. The alleged publications that are subject of this complaint were originally published from and or in Miami-Dade County, Florida. Venue is proper, and all pre-suit requirements have either been satisfied or waived, including pre-suit notice to media defendants in defamation action. Okay, so let's look at the factual background. Pre-defamatory and tortious interference background. So first, we're just establishing what Mr. Gosney's reputation was. So what did they ruin, right? So after law school and receiving a master's degree in criminal justice, Mr. Gosney has focused his many years on ethical advocacy in the area of criminal law and is a board-certified criminal trial lawyer. He's also a known advocate for strong prosecutorial ethical standards, is qualified to argue death penalty appeals, and has argued before the Florida Supreme Court on many occasions. Further, his many years of criminal advocacy, Mr. Gosney has authored many law review articles and books on criminal law topics. Right? So this part here establishes that he had a good reputation in the law community, right? And by publishing something like this, which is defamatory, they've gone and ripped at the very soul of what it was that set him apart in his profession. He was hired because of his strong prosecutorial ethical standards, right? This is why people sought him out, because he had this ethical advocacy in the area of criminal law. And his CV just spoke for itself, right? All it took was these very disparaging statements to be put out there. And once that happens, and then all the comments that come afterwards, it's a waterfall. It's very difficult to stop it. Gosney enjoys writing as part of his career and has engaged in fictional writing that takes from both the good and bad experiences of criminal prosecution and defense. One of Gosney's fictional books, Death Penalty Desires, okay, so this is the book in question, is a crime novel that portrays situations regularly encountered by criminal practitioners, as well as commonly depicted in other fictional crime novels, such as criminal subculture, adult language, rape and murder, prosecutorial misconduct, and the antisocial views of people within the criminal justice system. I've read the book, by the way. And This is a very good description of it, really. It's quite broad, but it has all this stuff in it. It's the kind of thing that you would not flinch at if you've watched a lot of, like, trials and things like that. The fictitious crime novel, and yes, it's fictitious, contained a morality play about two murders, a trial, and the death penalty. How an innocent person can be sent to death row, interesting, based on prosecutorial misconduct and ethical lapses of those involved in the criminal justice system. At the time in question, Gosney offered two versions of the novel, a PG version and an R-rated version, which is available only on Gosney's private website and contained disclaimers as to the content of the book for purchasers. How many authors do that? Hey, beautiful, wonderful. Yeah, I did say your name. Say my name, say my name. Yeah. How many authors offer a PG version of their book with disclaimers and stuff, right? Like, really? Like, you don't have to read the R-rated version. The R-rated version contained the following disclaimer. There is a lot of reality here, but also a lot of creative licenses. Try not to draw conclusions about the author from the content herein. Gee, Steve, you really did cover your bases, didn't you? But is there an extra graphic version? Sadly, no, Justin. Yeah, I only have the R-rated version too, David. P.S. By the way, if you have the R-rated version, or if you went to buy the R-rated version because you really wanted smut, you're going to be let down. Sorry, it's not what you get. On Wednesday, 26th of June 2024, due to his academic accomplishments and reputation, Gosney was hired as an assistant state attorney in Miami to assist in the many challenges confronting that office, including conviction integrity, policy development, including Brady compliance, and strengthening the ethics in the Miami-Dade State Attorney's Office. Well, isn't that something? Unfortunately, now this is important. I found this to be very important. Unfortunately, the Miami Herald, along with Woolman and Blasky, did not agree with the hiring of Gosney and purposefully began pressuring the state attorney's office to fire Gosney through publications attempting to equate Gosney's personal views and beliefs with villains in his fictional book. Now, I don't know what Steve knows about these two ladies and the Miami Herald and their beliefs about him and like this statement here, right? So them not agreeing with the hiring of him and purposefully pressuring the state attorney's office to fire him. But this is a strong statement. Can this be proven purely through the articles that they wrote? Maybe. The articles are pretty strong, and we'll review them in a moment. To say that they just didn't agree with the hiring of him, and the articles show that that was them purposefully pressuring the state attorney's office to fire him. Yeah, it's a strong statement. And I mean, I believe Steve. It will be challenged, I'm sure. But yeah, that's pretty full on. If some media reporters can do something like that, that's very scary. And for them to be successful as well. Woman interviewed Gosney on or around July 3rd, 2024. Well, isn't that interesting? What day did the article come out, guys? Who's been listening? What day did the first article come out? You get a prize if you remember. No one? No? Yay, Mav. Mav's onto it. July 3rd, 2024, indeed. Yes. Well, gee, she put a lot of effort into that, right? That must have been quite the intense interview in order to have gotten everything she needed out of the author of the book in order to then be able to disseminate that information so quickly and then write it all down, do a good analysis of both his information and then this competing information that she had formed an opinion as to him being this creep, basically. And then pretty much just throw out everything that Steve had said, it seems to me anyway, and write the article anyway on the same day before July 4th, which thanks for bringing that up because I would never have picked up on that one. Yes, let's get this thing out before the holiday. Hello, Mr. Bronco. How are you? God willing, Steve wins $100 million. First, it would be deserved. Second, I like having rich friends. Same. Indeed. How are you? Good to see you. It's a chuffing book. They should be ashamed of themselves. The poor guy lost his job. They sound an evil pair to me. Yeah, they don't sound like very nice people. Okay, so woman interviewed Gosney on or around July 3rd, 2024. Per the topics discussed and questions posed at the interview, it was apparent that defendants were prepared to write an article about Gosney that aligns his character, political beliefs, and morality upon the fictional villains of the book. I don't think that's too hard to prove. During the interview, Gosney explained to Woolman that his personal, social, and political beliefs were not reflections of the villains in the book. Duh. Like, do you really have to explain that to people? Go away. Do you really have to explain that to people that you, like, villains in a book that you wrote don't align with your own personal beliefs? Jesus Christ. And that they were in a place to give a dramatic picture of the system and its flaws, as opposed to endorsing any misogynistic beliefs or social taboos. In fact, Gosney made it clear that he did not endorse the behaviors of the villains in his fictional book. Oh my God. Hey, by the way, I don't endorse, beheading people. Like, if there's someone who beheaded someone, which there wasn't in the book, but still, like, it's ridiculous. How stupid are these women? During the interview, Woolman admitted that she had not read all the book at the time of the interview. Okay, so this is super important. Now, I don't know if Steve has a written record of her saying that, or if she said it on the phone, or if it was a Zoom call, or what, right? But that's pretty bad. If the writer of the article hadn't actually read the book, and when I say not read the book, not read all of the book, how can she make statements about the book that are total, like blanket statements about the book? So, like, the title of, let's have a look at one of the titles. Women Are Sex Objects in Sadomasochistic Novel by man hired to train Miami prosecutors. That's one of the names, one of the titles of the articles, right? So she's called it a sadomasochistic novel. It's, in her words, it is a sadomasochistic. How can I say that word? It is a sadomasochistic novel. How can you call something a sadomasochistic novel if you haven't read the whole goddamn novel? You can't. You literally can't. Right? You can't. Like, you can't say even that that's your opinion, because you haven't got an opinion, because you haven't read it. Is it like she's putting that out there as a statement of fact? Never talk to the media without making your own recording and tell them you are. Yeah, fair. I don't know. I and this is not me having spoken to Steve or anything like that, but I have a feeling this might be an email exchange, which would be fantastic. Well, regardless, she's going to have to give a deposition or something like that if this goes forward, or testify if it goes to a trial, which we hope not. So why can't you? You can say Harry Potter is about wizardry halfway through it. You could say it's about wizardry halfway through it. Well, that wouldn't be a blatant lie, would it? No one would probably challenge you on it. But if someone tried to challenge you, you can challenge her on this one. Woman has a history of going after market. You mean after attorneys hired into the DA's office? I don't trust Branca. Are you a woman, Maddie? Kidding. All right. However, within hours of the interview, defendants published a disparaging article about Gosney with the intent to humiliate his character and gain public support for his firing. Okay. July 3rd, 2024 article. Within hours of the interview with Gosney on July 3rd, 2024, despite knowledge of the actual falsity of their statements and or acting in reckless disregard for the truth, defendants published the first hit piece against Mr. Gosney, Exhibit A, hereinafter the first article. There was no other purpose of this first article being published in the Miami Herald other than to be used as sensationalized reporting and a personal attack upon Gosney with complete disregard for the truth or the negative impact the article could have upon the career of a man who was trying to make a difference in the local state attorney's office. Gosney's career is ruined by defendants simply because he wrote a fictional book that had villains who used language and had views that were offensive to readers, which is the very purpose of a villain in a fictional story. That's true. Yeah, he's kind of right there. What's the point of a villain that's nice? Right? Like, villains are supposed to be really hateable. So he's got villains in there. They're awful. And then they have a go at Steve for writing about these nasty villains. It's just pretty dumb. I don't like the argument that her interpretation of the book is wrong. She was wrong to target him and link his novel to his career. Okay, so there's more to the argument though, Mav, because she also goes on to say that there are no female heroes in the book. If she hasn't read all of the book, then how can she possibly say that there's no female heroes when she hasn't even gone through all of the females in the book to decide whether or not the females are depicted in the way that she says? And we'll get into that further. at least read the goddamn book. Yeah. So maybe I jumped the gun a little bit, Mavka, and commented on that too early before I had gotten to that. Okay, so the first article took a few socially negative phrases and themes associated with villains from a fictional book and wrongly imputed those negatives upon the character and morality of Gosney, simply because he was the author of that fictional book depicting a villain. The first article cited out of context the most salacious contents of the fictional novel to imply it was a sex novel. Trust me, guys, if you read this looking for a sex novel, you're going to be very let down. While ignoring the main themes and purpose of the novel, as well as disregarding the corrections to the narrative explained by Gosney prior to publication. All right, so the first article, and we'll read this. We might just pop over to the article for a second shortly. The first article contained the following specific false statements about the plaintiff. So the headline of the first article states, "Women are sex objects in sadomasochistic novel by man hired to train Miami prosecutors." By reading that headline, it leaves readers with the impression that Gosney is a man who views women as sex objects for his desires as a sadomasochist, and now he is training Miami prosecutors, which will tarnish the state attorney's office. All right. So to some people, this might seem like a bit of a leap. All right. But maybe we should look at it in context. So let's look at the article. What do you guys think? Like, this is how it appeared. A man hired to train Miami prosecutors wrote a violent... Oh, no. Is that what it says? Women are sex objects in... No, that's not what it said. The first article can... Okay, so let me read. I'm reading from the lawsuit. And this is where we need to be careful because they've changed things. So the lawsuit says that the first article states this, that women are sex objects in sadomasochistic novel by man hired to train Miami prosecutors. Let me see if I can get that exact wording out of this, because it may be the follow-up article. Women are sex objects. No, it's not in there. So it might be the second one. Yeah, okay. So it was actually the follow-up. Yeah, it was the one on July 5. So after the July 4th break that had that headline on it. Women are sex objects in sadomasochistic novel. Which is still technically the first article. It was just an update to the first article. Okay, so looking at that, guys, do you think that by reading that headline, it leaves readers with the impression that Gosney is a man who views women as sex objects for his desires as a sadomasochist, and now he is training Miami prosecutors, and that could tarnish the state attorney's office? Stop it. Your hand looks great. I think it's a fair statement to make. Like, you don't know him. There's no photo of him, like, in a suit looking like a lawyer. All there is his book with the dude's shirt being pulled off, and yeah, women are sex objects in sadomasochistic novel, and they just call him a man hired, not a lawyer. They make it sound like he's just some rando. Yeah. And they go straight to the thing about the R-rated death penalty desires thing. And then they go, okay, a lawyer who was just hired to train young prosecutors at the Miami-Dade State Attorney's Office is the recent author of an R-rated novel with sadomasochistic themes depicting women as sex objects and a transgender woman as an it, a he-beast, and the thing. Explore a woman's desire for submission as she stands accused of being the infamous sex toy killer, the book blurb says. Steve Gosney was sworn in last week as a new hire for the Miami-Dade State Attorney's Office, run by Catherine Fernandez-Rundle. He was hired amid a slate of changes Fernandez-Rundle made in response to judicial findings and defense lawyers' complaints that some of her prosecutors violate the legal rules of criminal court. Gosney told a social media audience that the state attorney liked his passion for ethics. It appears that neither Fernandez-Rundle nor any of her top chiefs read Gosney's novel Death Penalty Desires. Well, I think neither did you, Brittany. Which is easily purchased on his self-named website or Amazon, has been discussed on his Rumble video channel and is listed on his resume. The state attorney's office did not release documents requested by the Miami Herald related to his hiring, including his job description and salary. Gosney told the Miami Herald that he doesn't condone the sex-based violence and misogynistic thinking of his characters. Well, that was a long way down, wasn't it? How far do we have to get down there? We had to get down to there. He said the book illustrates his stance against the death penalty. Oh, hang on. Where is this? What I would really like to get to is where they talk about legal vices and Let's Go Brandon. Is that in here? Oh, there it is. In his book acknowledgements, Gosney thanks his friends, including online followers with the account names like Legal Vices and Let's Go Brandon. Yep. Anyway, let's go back. Might just stay in this view, it's easier. All right. Yeah, rip Jeff. Okay. The artfully written headline invokes interest from the reader with a negative question of why would Miami prosecutors be trained by one that is a sadomasochist and sees women as sex objects? The artfully written headline does nothing to dispel the immediate negative imputation upon Gosney, and as will be seen below, the entire article is slanted significantly against Gosney. Further, the focus on the book Death Penalty Desires is not sadomasochism or focused on depicting women as sex objects, but instead there are two villains that have sadist tendencies, which is encompassed in a few sentences within the entire novel. Although there are villains in the fictional book that do look at women as sex objects, the prevailing theme is that women are strong and are able to overcome adversity even when objectified by villain men. There should never, this part, okay. I strongly agree with this. There should never have been a story about Mr. Gosney's fictional book that also encompasses his position with the state attorney, as it was completely unrelated to the training he was to provide the state attorney's office. See, it makes perfect sense. Why? Why write an article about him writing this book in relation to his appointment with the state attorney's office, unless you want it to cause trouble for him and his job, right? Unless you want to make his hirers look bad. They're completely unrelated. They have nothing to do with one another. It's like writing a story about him and his Brucey and the One-Eyed Wonder Dog and putting it out there and going, oh, well, here's a man who writes stories about little puppies. And he also is just being hired to work on ethics with the state attorney's office. Like, people would be like, and? Like, there's just no correlation. There's nothing. It makes no sense unless you have an agenda. The body of the article goes on to state, the vast majority of females in the book are described with vulgar disrespect by the various characters and the narrator. Right, so I have a question. How can this person or these two writers possibly know that the vast majority of females in the book are described with vulgar disrespect by the various characters and the narrator if they haven't read the whole goddamn book? She was going after the DA for not vetting Steve about the book. Yeah, it was clear that there's quite a few parts throughout all 3 articles, or 1.5 articles, however you like to put it. 2.5 articles, that the attack was also on the hirers, so Fernandez Rundle and her hiring team. But you don't just take out a whole person's professional reputation in the process and just go, whatever. Vast majority is defined as the greatest part of something, to the point where alternatives are nearly irrelevant in size, and almost all of a group. It is absolutely not true that the vast majority of females in the book are described with vulgar disrespect by the various characters or Gosney. There are few parts of the book where villains do describe a few females with disrespect, but it is not the theme of the book, and is simply the thoughts of a negatively portrayed villains in a fictitious book that would have no bearing on the character of Gosney or his ability to train or work with the prosecuting attorneys. The sentence falsely equates the words, thoughts, and actions of villains with a fictional novel as the opinions of Gosney, and associates this authorship of the fictitious book as something that should disqualify him from his job. Right? This is so stupid. The first article cherry picks some of the most sensitive and emotionally charged aspects of the villains portrayed in the book in an intentional attempt to falsely support the above sentence, along with the false premise that men controlling or dominating women against their will are the prevailing subject throughout the novel and are endorsed by Gosney, which is just stupid. Like, do we think that authors that are writing fiction endorse everything that their characters do? However, defendants selectively leave out any portions of the book that would show that the book was truly about flawed humans that work in a broken legal system. Well, we wouldn't want that, would we? With undertones of women being able to overcome adversity and make negatives into positives. The statement, most characters are portrayed as sex objects, is false and defamatory. Although there are a few villains in the book that have misogynistic views, the book casts these thoughts and characters in a negative light. There are around 35 female characters in the book. Well, they wouldn't know because they didn't read the book. 13 female characters, and another 22 minor female characters, for which only 6 of those characters were associated with sexual references. Really? Okay, so women are sex objects in sadomasochistic novel. How can you say that when only 6 of those characters were associated with sexual references at all? The statement the book equates being female with being submissive is false and defamatory and meant to interfere with Gosney's position with the state attorney. Even if this statement was true, there is no basis to align this fictional book with Gosney's ability to do his job. No. However, the statement is not true, and the novel does not equate being female with being submissive. In fact, the main female's character's arc is one of learning to stand up for herself. See, here's the thing, right? I feel like this part, even if the statement was true, there's no basis to align this fictional book with Gosney's ability to do his job. Then it feels like there's no need to even justify all of this stuff. But he will, like, it's a legal document, so you do. But there's no need. Like, why justify what his choice of characters are? It's fiction. Hey, Steve, how are you? Different Steve to the one we're talking about. How are you? Defamation? That's my call to action. Also, female lawyer Josephine Roy Esquire handles the mitigation in a penalty phase of death penalty case all by herself and at no point needs help from any male, as was stated in the first article. And between her and her husband, she is the attorney who is qualified to handle death cases. There is nothing within the book that would indicate that Gosney was of the belief that being female implies submissiveness. And then there's another subheading that says female heroes ? And that is false and defamatory. The false and misleading subheading supports defendants' preconceived false narrative that Gosney is misogynistic. This is important because this whole idea of Gosney being misogynistic, this got repeated over and over in comments and things. Like, people very much latched on to the idea that he was somehow a misogynist because of this idea of him not including any female heroes and all the women being sex objects in this book, and so therefore he's a misogynist. In fact, the novel contains many female heroes, so I'm not going to go through all of these, but he's gone and listed out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, who are all females in the book who are presented positively. Again, it's the sensationalized taglines and emotional grabbers used by defendants to purposely falsely cast Gosney in a misogynistic light with the intent of harming his reputation and career. All right, so now we're going to go forward to the next article. So on August 2, despite knowledge, this is important, despite knowledge of the actual falsity of her statements and acting in reckless disregard of the truth, Warman and the Miami Herald published, printed, and distributed the second hit piece against Mr. Gosney, attached as Exhibit B, herein the second article. The fact that the second article was published further supports the malicious intent of the defendants to harm Gosney. Now, like, remember beforehand we were talking about malice, and you need to show malice, prove malice if the person is a public figure. Now, we don't know whether or not Gosney is considered to be a public figure, but there's enough there to show that there was malice anyway. So it's covered off in this document. I will quickly just pop you over to the other article. We'll have a look at this. Okay, so lawyer who wrote sadomasochistic novel is cutting ties with Miami State Attorney's Office. So yes, that's the correct name of it. I don't know why this one's showing up on AOL for some reason. I didn't even know AOL still existed. But it is, yeah, it's just showing the Miami Herald article in there. This one's just got Brittany Woolman's name on it. Lawyer who wrote sadomasochistic novel, cutting ties with Miami State Attorney's Office. 2 months after the Miami-Dade State Attorney's Office hired a lawyer to train new prosecutors, he is leaving the job amid controversy over his recently self-published novel, rife with sexual violence and misogyny. Steve Gosney, a Daytona Beach public defender, moved his family to Miami to start a job training new prosecutors. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, yep. Full of crude sexual violence, description of a transgender person as man-beast with a mutilated crotch, and depicts female characters as having an intrinsic need to submit to a masculine man. Prosecutors in the book are craven and corrupt. That's probably pretty true. A homeless person is a grubby bum, and an Arab-looking doctor is referred to as a camel jockey. The terms of Gosney's departure are unclear. Spokesman Ed Griffith said in an email that Mr. Gosney will be separating from our office in the upcoming weeks. Yep. Okay, anyway, let's go back to this. Right, so the second article contained the following specific false statements about the plaintiff. The headline, lawyer who wrote sadomasochistic novel is cutting ties with Miami State Attorney Office, is false and defamatory for the same reasons as stated above. It is not a sadomasochistic novel. Within the second article, the statement, 2 months after the Miami-Dade State Attorney's Office hired a lawyer to train new prosecutors, he is leaving the job amid controversy over his recently self-published novel rife with sexual violence and misogyny, is false and defamatory because it implies that sexual violence and misogyny are the primary subject matter of the book, and that it was his association with sexual violence and misogyny that caused him to lose his employment. Well, interesting, because it wasn't sexual violence and misogyny that caused him to lose his employment. It was probably the articles that made it sound like sexual violence and misogyny were the reasons he lost his employment. Go figure. How are you? I'm bronzed. And it's Nick. Hello, Nick. Good to see you. There's a little raid going on. We're being raided by the Vikings. Oh, noes. Good to see you, mate. It's been a while. We need to hang out. I say sadomasochist funny. No, you do, Justin. Okay. The statement, his sex novel contained few positive depictions of women, is false and defamatory, which was explained above. As in the first article, the second article cherry picks the most emotionally charged language of the book and uses it to falsely equate the words, thoughts, and actions of the villains of the novel as the opinions of the author, and then aligns them with the reasons he lost his job. Probably you guys are the reasons he lost his job. But hey, upon information and belief, the aforesaid Miami Herald articles were written by Woolman and Oblasky in Florida, and the article was reviewed, edited, and approved for publication by the Miami Herald, which was published to the entire Miami Herald readership to include national and international readers. Yes, everybody saw it. Defendant's statements and innuendos about Gosney were false and made with actual malice, as defendant knew or should have known the statements were false or were made with reckless disregard of whether it was false or not. Yeah, if they'd read the actual book, which they didn't, or if they'd paid attention to the words that Mr. Gosney said on July 3rd in the supposed interview, if you could call it that, then they would know that the words that they were putting on their little internet site, or I don't know if they actually print paper anymore, were false. They were written with a reckless disregard for the truth. Absolutely. And as a direct and proximate result of defendant's defamatory statements, plaintiff has suffered harm, including but not limited to, yes, he lost his job, the damage to reputation, significant emotional distress and anguish, and economic loss. I just can't even start to describe the change I saw in Steve over that time. And even still now, when like we talk or he comes on stream, he's obviously the most lovely, amazing person, but this has changed him. This is a really traumatic experience to go through. I don't think he's ever really been hated. How can someone like him be hated? He's just such a great guy. People have always just loved Steve. And to have people just come after him and say the most terrible things about him, I think it was a shock. And it just really shook his confidence. And this reputation that he built up over decades, to just have it taken away so fast. It was hard to witness. In fact, these articles reach peers and judges in the legal community, some of which is evidenced by the following. This is going to be hard to read. Okay. The Florida Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, Miami chapter, refused working with Gosney and called for his termination. Wow. The Miami-Dade chapter of the Florida Association of Women's Lawyers refused to work with Gosney and called for his termination. It is believed the article moved a judge on the 3rd DCA to forward the Herald article to Gosney's employer, Ms. Rundle, followed up with a phone call to express her concerns about Gosney's assignments based solely on the defamatory content of the article. Many others that are known and unknown believe the falsities of these articles that resulted in Gosney losing his job and blackballing him from his established profession in criminal law. It is clear that because of the false articles published by the defendants, Gosney has been significantly damaged both personally and professionally. Okay, so count 1, defamation. The Miami Herald plaintiff incorporates by reference the alleged contained in paragraphs 1 through 38. So what we just read was the counts up there. And now we're going to look at them being aimed at these specific defendants. So we're going to, I'll read out the first one, but then there's significant repetition throughout the others. So 39 says plaintiff incorporates by reference the allegations contained in 1 through 38, which we just read. The Miami Herald includes employees Wellman and Blusky negligently published false statements and innuendos of fact concerning plaintiff's character, political beliefs, and morality with the intent to harm Gosney in his profession and office. The Miami Herald knowingly published false statements. So, yeah, knowingly is important. Of fact concerning plaintiff's character, political beliefs, and morality with the intent to harm Gosney in his profession and office. The Miami Herald published these false statements of fact to third parties locally and intentionally. The Miami Herald acted with actual malice in making these false statements of fact, and they were made with knowledge and that they were false. It's important that there was knowledge that they were false, and with reckless disregard for their truth. As a direct and proximate result of defendants' defamatory statements, plaintiffs had suffered harm, including but not limited to loss of job, damaged reputation, emotional distress, and economic loss. Wherefore, plaintiff respectively requests that this court enter judgment in favor of plaintiff. Okay, right. So Then it goes to Woolman individually, very similar allegations, paragraphs 1 through 38. And then it goes to Blasky individually, again, allegations 1 through 38. Then we get to the tortious interference. So count 4, tortious interference with a business relationship. And it's similar, but slightly different. So tort, wrongful act, or an infringement of a right, but tortious interference, like we looked at a moment ago, is to do with a business relationship. So this is to do with the defendants interfering with Steve Gosney's employment and being the catalyst, really, for him being sacked. So plaintiff incorporates by reference the allegations contained in paragraphs 1 through 38, as is fully set forth herein. And plaintiff has established identified employment. Okay, so as of June 26, 2024, the plaintiff had established identifiable employment position with the state attorney's office in Miami. So remember, from tortious interference, there had to have been a contract or a business situation that existed, and the plaintiff had one. He had an employment contract, right? So the Miami Herald, to include employees Woolman and Blasky, knew that Gosney had an employment position with the state attorney's office, and through 2 publications intentionally interfered with Gosney's employment with the state attorney's office without legal justification or any privilege to do so, right? So there's the allegation that they interfered with that. The Miami Herald's intentional interference with Gosney's job proximately caused Gosney to lose his job. So again, it's a big allegation, but I think it's fairly easy to prove, because what else caused it? Unless they can find some way of showing that he was sacked for some other reason. I'm sure Steve's got evidence of why this happened. From which Gosney suffered great financial harm. Wherefore, plaintiff respectfully requests that the court enter judgment in favour of plaintiff, etc., etc. And then the same tortious interference count against Woolman individually and Blasky individually, and demand for a jury trial. Let's hope it doesn't get that far, hey? Just a sec, guys. Yep. So just to recap, for anyone who missed it, Death Penalty Desires is a work of fiction. Yeah. Yeah. Now, I wanted to just take you forward in time a little bit. So this is about 6 months after all this occurred. And so Steve settled into his new role in civil practice. So he got a job with a civil firm. He didn't particularly want to leave working for the public. Like, that wasn't his choice, but he kind of had to, right? And he makes the best of every situation. But I just wanted to show you this.
In criminal transfer pretty well over into civil, and especially since I I'm not public servant anymore, and I'm sort of, I was thinking, how has this experience kind of affected me? And I think I can finally speak on that a little bit, and that is, I'm becoming much more mercenary, and I'd say that it's interesting because, I'm very much a public servant for 20 years, and I really like that. I like serving the state of Florida, serving the people. And all my articles that I wrote, law review articles and things, were very much targeted to helping the profession and helping other lawyers. And I just don't, I mean, I got to say that I really feel that's been kind of burned out of me. And I'm becoming much more mercenary in my opinion. Now maybe that's driven by this nature of civil practice. And I'm also trying to bring a little bit of the ethics and the, what would it be called? Cooperation. I don't know how to say this, but I mean, I have a philosophy that your job is not to make the other side miserable. Civil is very dirty. There's a lot of nasty attorneys and a lot of nasty stuff goes on.
Oh, shit.
And I would say that I'm trying, when possible, to be kind and make the litigation experience okay for the lawyers. Now, I can't say that I'm successful 100%, but I have had pretty good luck with a few plaintiffs' lawyers who have been pretty friendly.
Really?
Hold on a second.
Okay. Yeah, so, I mean, you can tell, like, he's let down to have to change his career when he didn't want to, right? Like, he made the decision to change his pathway and go to the state attorney's office. He didn't make the decision to go into civil. That wasn't what he wanted to do, but he's making the best of it. And like, God bless him, he's doing his very best in life. But yeah, he's a few years from retirement, and it's been really, really tough, right? I really hope this doesn't end in a trial. I hope it doesn't go further. I hope that this just settles really quickly. I think that Miami Herald and the other defendants owe it to this man. They have ruined his career. They don't seem to care. And I know Steve. I'm sure he's not going to be like digging his heels in trying to get millions of dollars. He's very much a principled man. But look, I don't necessarily think that everything that's in the document would be, I'm sure he would be willing to negotiate, and his lawyers would be willing to negotiate on some point. Mavka wrote, I saw that you brought up something about, it's probably a fair point. So her misinterpretation of literature is defamation. Sounds weak to me. Tying elements of his fictional novel to him as a lawyer is strong. Maybe that's something that would be argued, potentially sorted out prior to trial or not go to trial at all. But I believe everything that Steve says is genuine and honest to his experience. I don't think that he would make anything up at all. I think he would go through every word of this document with his lawyers and be very at peace with the words that have been written. That's the man I know. So I think he misses streaming, but it's too risky now. Yes and no. I think he's tired. He's working really long days, like private practice. The civil world it's really hard, and this has just knocked so much out of him. I've just noticed that it's tough to get him at night because he works like 6 a.m. till 7 p.m. and then he would really like to spend a little bit of time at home, and yeah, it's tough for him. Whereas he used to work during the day and then go and teach at nighttime, and then he'd stream, and it's a bundle of energy, you know. So yeah, I've been through myself situations where you're going through life and everything seems fine, and then something happens like this out of the blue, and like people come after you, or there's a misunderstanding and you just don't understand, you don't get why it's happened, but it's sent to test you, I guess. And yeah, it can take a long time to bounce back. And I think Steve's doing really, really well. Like I saw the change in him, and I don't blame him at all, but he's doing his best, and it can't be underestimated though what this did. Yeah, it's not nothing. It is not nothing. Yeah. So I would just like to wish him all the best. Thank you guys all for being here. I just want to make sure I haven't missed anything. No. And I will follow up if there is any updates. I'm hoping there won't be any, except it's been settled. And then Steve can come on and talk about it. That would be great. All right. I will probably stream, not tomorrow, but the day after, maybe on the David case, or the Lawrence case, but something else. Thank you all for hanging out. I really appreciate you all. And I've only missed you. No, I said I read your one out. Let me just check you. $9.99. The title of hell is David. You didn't even pay the $20. The title of hell is sex novel, Doing It Down Under. Thank you, David, for the $9.99. Appreciate it. Thank you for being in chat. And also, hey, Andrew, thanks for hanging out. Nice to see you. Thank you, everybody, for all your support today. Much appreciated. All right, time for the song. Time for the song.
Her name was Helen. She was an Aussie. She was a fake lawyer from the future. She got on YouTube and made some live streams. The co-host is Darby and she dances sometimes. The words are always so loud, and because she's an 803.